Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Iyer with Preparis Bold Planning. Heck, I'm not sure what we're called anymore. The guy who's helping you write your hazard mitigation plan. And we are here today to talk about, well, quite truthfully, myriad things about where we are on the plan, what's happening with the plan, some requests of you, the format of the plan, all of that good kind of stuff. I know we're here at 2 o'clock, but I was hoping we'd have a few more people join us. I'm going to give it just another minute or two. And hopefully we can get some more folks into the room and then we'll get that presentation going. I promise I won't eat very much of your time. Owen, anything from you before we start kind of kicking this off and getting rolling?
Nothing on our end. It's you got Brian, Adam, and myself all in the EOC.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, I'm going to give this a go. Technology, always fun. And see if I can't share my screen here with you and get that going. So let's share screen. And I'm hoping that you all can see a PowerPoint at this juncture. And what we'll do is, of course, it's obligatory. I'm going to take you through the PowerPoint presentation here. And let me blow this up here a little bit so that it's much bigger, and we'll rock on through. So we're here today for sort of our midterm planning meeting. The good news is that we're actually probably much further along than the midterm, but I had to think of something clever to call this, so that's what we're calling this. For those of you who have attended any of my meetings before, any of the ones that we've given either live or in person, you know that I am very, very happy to answer any questions at any time. So if you've got any questions, comments, concerns, if you want to know more about something or know less about something, please don't hesitate to let me know. The easiest and most effective way to do that would be to just simply unmute yourself and say, hey, Matt, what do you think about this? I sometimes do check the chat functionality, although I know Owen is looking at that as well. So flat out, the easiest way to do it is to just say, hey, Matt, what do you think about this? So I'm going to start my slideshow here from current slide. And again, I hope you guys can all see this. If anybody has any problems, please let me know, and I'll try to do some IT jujitsu here to get it to work. But let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So we did the welcome and introductions. We're going to review our participating jurisdictions, the folks that have dove into the pool and are playing along. Not only are we going to do that, but we're going to talk about the plan format as to how we're incorporating those participating jurisdictions. And there's a little bit, or actually not a little bit, but a fairly big change from the last time that is hopefully going to make this much, much easier on everybody and hopefully make the plan much more usable for everybody. And that's when we're going to talk about that plan format. We're going to talk about our winnowed down list of hazards. And then we're going to, again, review how those hazards are presented and how we're incorporating our participating jurisdictions in that. And then finally, we're going to talk about our mitigation action items. Remembering that mitigation action items are simply if someone were to hand your community a bag of money and say, go make things safer for your community, how would you do that? What would you spend that money on? And we're going to talk about a review of your old actions. And then we're going to talk about maybe some of the new actions and the requirements as well. We'll finish this up with our next steps. And again, we'll end up with our discussion and questions. But of course, I hope we have those discussions and questions as we're working through this presentation. So let's talk about our participating jurisdictions. And let's talk about what's a little bit different than last time. Last time when we wrote the plan, or when you wrote the plan, you did 2 volumes. Volume 1 really concerned the meat of the plan, and it concerned the county. Volume 2 were the jurisdictional annexes, where each jurisdiction kind of took a smaller version of Volume 1 and wrote it for themselves. And the annexes themselves last time tended to vary fairly wildly. There was not a lot of format friendliness in that. So what we did is we had actually pretty extensive discussions with both Cal OES and FEMA about the requirements for jurisdictional annexes. And they both opined, they both told us that that is in no way, shape, or form a requirement to have an approved and adopted hazard mitigation plan. In fact, California is one of the few states in the nation where that is a popular trend. And I say a trend because I happen to know obliquely the guy who did it first. He did it first about 10 years ago, and I'm pretty sure he was getting paid by the pound for the plan. And what he did is he wrote volume one, and then he said, we're going to do these jurisdictional annexes, which are mini little plans. And he did it, and it submitted it, and it passed. And because folks tend to be kind of a jump on the bandwagon kind of thing, they said, this is a new requirement. I see this plan just passed. We're going to do that as well. It is absolutely not that at all. And so what we're doing is we're simplifying the plan for you. We are taking the critical parts of the jurisdictional annexes and we're moving them into volume one. And I'm going to show you how we're doing that. So really there is only going to be a volume one, which should make things much, much simpler, much, much cleaner, and much, much easier for everybody. Now, here are the requirements in order to be considered a participating jurisdiction. You have to participate in planning meetings. You have to provide information. You have to review your mitigation action items. You have to comment on draft versions of the plan. You need to foster the, the public input process. And most importantly, you need to adopt the plan. Now, again, nothing in Cal OES language and nothing in FEMA language says you have to adopt an annex of the plan. You absolutely do not. You can adopt volume one of the plan, and you are considered an adopting and a participating jurisdiction. Now, there are some guidelines on that. When we do one volume of the plan, your particular idiosyncrasies, for lack of a better word, have to be considered in there. So we have to tell a story not only of the county, but of each one of our participating jurisdictions. And I'm going to show you how we do that. Now, for our participating jurisdictions, we also have another category. And I took a little bit of a liberty here. Now, this is in no way, shape, or form something that is set in stone. This was just an idea. We also have a category called participating stakeholder community. This is for some of our maybe smaller communities or communities that really may not go after a mitigation grant on their own. That is really the distinction there. And if we cover these two, and there tend to be community services districts you see in here, both Lake Shastina Community Services District and McLeod Community Services District, what we do is we roll them up under the county. When the county adopts the plan, these jurisdictions are nestled under the county. And the reason we do this is because if there ever comes a time where one of these jurisdictions wants to apply for a hazard mitigation grant, the feeling is that they would work with the county. The county would apply for the grant, would provide the resources to apply for and manage the grant, but the community itself would get the benefits of the grant. Now, again, this is in no way set in stone. This was just an idea looking at what we considered to be potentially community capabilities. If either one of these community services districts wants to be considered a fully participating and adopting jurisdiction, we write the plan that way. That's no problem at all. If one of these jurisdictions says, let's say Lake Shastina says, yes, we're okay with being a participating stakeholder community at this juncture, and then 2 years later they say, you know what, turns out we want to be our own standalone jurisdiction, we just amend the plan to include that. And that, again, is no drama whatsoever. So this is just something to think about, especially for those. And this is how it looks out. We have our lead planning partner here in Siskiyou County. We have our adopting jurisdictions. These are jurisdictions that will need to adopt the hazard mitigation plan once it is completed. And then we have our participating stakeholder communities. So that's where we sit now with our participating jurisdictions. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into the plan as to how we're kind of tying this all together. So one of the things is when we did the annex-based approach, every jurisdiction said, or did a write-up and said, populations do this, populations do that, et cetera, et cetera. What we've done is we've combined this all together into one section where we talk about the population of our participating jurisdictions and the county. and we show the population over the past 20 years, a percentage change, the population density. So again, we're not just writing this for the county, we're writing this to include all of our jurisdictions. And then when we show metrics and graphs, we do the same thing. So here's our Siskiyou County population and what it's been doing over the past 20 years. And here is our participating jurisdiction populations and what they've been doing over the past 20 years. So we don't just look, when we combine these together at the county, we look at everybody. We do the same thing for planning capabilities. In the old annex-based approach, every annex, or almost every annex, had a discussion of capabilities. What capabilities does each jurisdiction have? And the writing was pretty much the same over and over. Again, there were some outliers there, but it was pretty much the same over and over. So what we do with one volume of the plan is we identify, in this example, our planning capabilities, comprehensive plans, community wildfire protection plans, zoning plans, et cetera, et cetera. And then we talk about the county. And so here is Siskiyou County's plans and what kind of plan they are. But then we also talk about our participating stakeholder communities. And you'll see the ones here with an X say, do they have that type of plan? Now, for our participating communities, what we're going to do is we're going to send you these tables to have you change them or amend them to see if we've got them correct or if anything has changed. But again, this meets the requirement of not only showing the county, but also including all of our participating stakeholders and not doing unnecessary duplication in every single annex. Now, when we talk about our identified hazards, we do much the same thing. When we talk about our identified hazards, and these are our identified hazards. Now, this is the first thing up for discussion. These are the hazards, the natural hazards that we identified that we believe that jurisdictions are vulnerable to. Now, we're not saying that there are not other hazards that you are potentially vulnerable to, but what we are saying is this. Recognizing that there is a limited amount of money available to fund hazard mitigation programs, if someone handed your jurisdiction a bag of money, what would you mitigate? What hazard would you mitigate? And we believe that these are the ones. Now, we were a little bit soft on some of these, like landslide and volcano. If we're being completely honest, there's not much you can do to mitigate a volcanic eruption. What it tends to be is public education and perhaps permanent signage illustrating, evacuation routes. Landslide is another one. Landslides do occur, and we recognize that they occur. The problem with landslides is that there's not a really great repository of data concerning landslide occurrence. But these are the hazards that we've done. Now, subsidence is an interesting one because subsidence tends to be related to other hazards, particularly drought. When we draw down our aquifers, it tends to make the ground more unstable, and we tend to have a greater subsidence rate. That's happening now in Tule Lake. So we see that that's happening there, but we put it as its own standalone hazard as well. So these are the hazards that we've identified. If anybody wants to add another hazard or have a discussion about another hazard, we are absolutely positively happy to do so. But these are the ones that we felt were credible and important. And we looked at these through the lens of a whole bunch of things. We looked at data. So we looked at, and you'll see some of this in a little bit, we looked at the FEMA National Risk Index for all the identified natural hazards and saw what kind of risk do we have to these hazards. We looked at the state of California hazard mitigation plan and read through that and said, what do they identify as hazards for particular regions? And then that's how we winnowed this list down. Now, again, just like our capabilities assessment, just like our population and our what's happening to us assessments, we take a look at this through the larger lens of the county, and we also take a look at it through the smaller lens of our participating jurisdictions. And we do that in a whole bunch of different ways. The first thing we do is we look at the changing conditions. What do we think is changing with these hazards? Is it improving, worsening, or getting, or is it unchanged? And we kind of look at the data and then we put some notes there and we say, hey, look, we think that the earthquake hazard is unchanged because the geologic conditions haven't changed. Earthquakes work on very long geologic time frames, and those conditions really haven't changed. But we could look at something like subsidence, and we can say, well, we think the conditions for subsidence tend to be worsening, and that tends to be in conjunction with drought and aquifer drawdowns. So again, what we do is we look at the conditions and say, what's changing? We also look at our vulnerabilities and try to determine what's changing. Are our vulnerabilities increasing, decreasing, or remaining unchanged? And again, if we look at something like a dam failure, happily, we believe that the vulnerability to dam failure is decreasing, particularly because you got rid of two of your extremely high hazard dams. So you just got rid of them on the river and they're no longer gone. And so we say, hey, look, we think that this is decreasing because the number of citizens and property exposed to a dam failure event has decreased. But if we look at something like flood, for example, we think that flood, the vulnerability may be increasing because despite your continued population decline and your static levels of housing, we think that wildfire occurrences and drought and things like that are going to make an increased susceptibility to this hazard because they're going to occur in all sorts of different areas. And so again, what we wanted to try to explain here is what's changing in these hazards. They're getting better or they're getting worse. Then on hazard specific levels, we start looking at things in there. And again, these are just examples here, and I'll spin you through the plan a little bit as well. But one of the things we do is we try to look at the local level and we look at things like what can a dam failure impact? And so for this example right here, we've overlaid where the dam locations are next to high capacity transmission lines and hydroelectric generating plants. And so this gives an idea that if we have a dam failure, what it's going to impact for our capacity. Now, along with this, we go into a discussion about what the costs are to replace or repair transmission lines, what the costs are to replace or repair generating stations. So we have a metric that we can understand where it says, hey, if we do have a dam failure, what are we on the hook for potentially? We drill down into information as to potentially impacted infrastructure. So this is an example of potentially impacted transportation infrastructure if we have a Box Canyon Dam sunny day failure. And what this does is it says, here's our infrastructure classification. Here's the name of that infrastructure. If we have a full sunny day failure, here's how long it's going to take to get there. And here's the flood depth. Now, going along with this, we also say, okay, here's an explanation of potential costs if we have to rebuild or repair a bridge or a street or an interstate highway. And so again, we start putting metrics to these kind of failures. We take a look, and again, this is with dam failure, we take a look at potential what we call critical infrastructure or community lifelines in potential inundation areas. And again, we say, hey, look, here are what's identified in there. This is for the Greenhorn Dam breach analysis. Here's how long the water is going to take to get there. And here's what we anticipate to be the maximum flood depth for those particular structures. Now, what we don't have, and when we get to the end of the presentation, this is going to want to be one of my asks, is we don't have valuations for those structures. So we don't know what the current insurance valuation is. Now, again, we can use an RS mean survey to tell you what average construction costs are and give you an idea. But one of the asks that we're going to ask you for data is, do you have an insurance evaluation on that? Now, again, as another example here, one of the things that we also use to get an idea of our local level risk versus our high level risk is the National Risk Index, the FEMA National Risk Index. And the National Risk Index is a repository of data that takes a look at a lot of factors and then dials it down to a specific natural hazard. In this case, we're looking at drought. And what it does is it says, okay, for the county, here is your risk index for drought, and here's your national percentile. And then on a census tract level, it doesn't do it on a jurisdictional level. It does it on a census tract level. It breaks down what that individual census tract risk is and what that individual national percentile risk is. And so what we've done is we've taken the census tracts for each one of our participating jurisdictions, and we've tied that to that risk index. And then a step further, we take a look at the expected annual loss. This is, again, using all of this FEMA NRI data, and based on not only the county, but the census tract data, we take a look at what the expected annual loss and the national percentile is, and then we give you a drought expected annual loss. So, for example, Doris, on an average year from drought, can expect a loss of $5,400,000. And so again, we do that for the applicable hazards to again show not only the county level vulnerability, but also to show the jurisdictional level, the jurisdictional vulnerability. And we do that in a bunch of ways as well. We look at something called the National Centers for Environmental Information, and we take a look at occurrence data there. And we look at what happened and what occurred and what was the reported damages on that. And again, we try to break that down by jurisdiction as well. So that's how we incorporate our jurisdictions into the hazard analysis section of our plan. Now, let's talk a little bit about our mitigation action items. One of the things that has to be done for a jurisdiction to be considered participating is they have to generate mitigation action items, remembering that mitigation action items are actions that are taken to reduce or eliminate long-term risk and vulnerability to identified hazards. Now, the key there is long-term. FEMA will say, we don't want you to present us with Band-Aid fixes. We want fixes that if we're going to give you money to do these projects, they are going to have a long-term net positive benefit on the communities. So what we've done, and we're working on this, and we're going to send this to you, by next week, we're going to get this to you. But what we've done is this. We've taken a look at all of the old mitigation actions that you proposed in your last plan. We have pulled those forward and we've said, okay, let's take a look at those. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. But what we noticed is it didn't really meet the FEMA requirements. FEMA requires that for each participating jurisdiction, you have to have at least one action for every identified hazard that can impact you. And for most of us, I don't think that there's a hazard that we identified that couldn't impact your jurisdiction. I may be swayed potentially on landslide, and I may be swayed potentially on land subsidence, but for the rest of them, and dam failure, I'll throw that in there as well. But for the rest of them, they tend to be county-wide hazards. And so we noticed that most jurisdictions didn't put actions in there for them to cover those hazards. And so we may need to add some actions in there. Now, with your previous plan mitigation actions items, and I'm going to show you what this looks like on the next slide. One of the things that we're going to ask you to do is this: review them. The first thing we want you to review them for is, are they really mitigation action items? Are they long-term actions that reduce the risk and vulnerability to the community? The second thing we want you to review them for is what happened with them. Over the past 5 years, if we're looking at those actions, have they been completed? If you look at that action and your jurisdiction says, I don't know why that's in there, we would never do that, or we don't want to do that, are we going to delete it? Is that an action that you identified 5 years ago and you haven't done yet? And that's okay. It's okay to say, hey, we didn't do this, but we need to identify as to why it wasn't done. Did we not have the people? Did we not have the political support? Did we not have the money to be able to do it? We can also modify some of these old mitigation action items. We can rewrite them to bring them current or to make them more meaningful. And then some of your actions are what we consider to be ongoing actions. For example, a lot of you are NFIP participants, the National Flood Insurance Program participants. Participation in that is an ongoing mitigation action item because you do that over and over and over again. Now, I want to show you what this looks like. So this is Siskiyou County's old mitigation action items. So this is what the mitigation action item was. This is the current status. Is it ongoing? Is it ongoing, but we've got funding constraints with this? What's going on? This is the old plan number, and this is the new plan number. And then what we do is we integrate these actions in, if they are relevant, into our new mitigation mitigation action items. So you'll see here that we've got some new action items added in here. And then we've got an old one in here. This one is identified as ongoing, and it is participation in the NFIP. Now, this is just an example. I want you to see what this looks like. So what we do is we've got our action identifier, our description, the hazard that it addresses, the responsible party. Now, this actually has to be a title, the priority, and in the plan, and when we send this to you, we'll give you a description of what the priority is. The goals addressed, again, in our last planning meeting, I'm sorry, I jumped forward there. In our last planning meeting, we identified our goals. So now we want to make sure that these action items dovetail with those goals. We've got an estimated cost in here. So what we think this is going to cost. Now, again, we are not asking you at this juncture to do a benefit cost analysis. What we want you to do at this juncture is sort of back of the envelope, estimate what it's going to cost. And I'll tell you why. Because if you say we are going to cover the town of Weed with a protective plexiglass bubble, I'm all in. But that's probably $1 billion project. And remember that for most of these projects, if not all of them, there is a required match. Now, that required match may be 25% if you get it from a Building Resilient Infrastructure and Community grant or a hazard mitigation grant program grant. The match is 25%. And if you say you're going to do $1 billion project, you need to locally be able to come up with $250 million. Now, for most of us, that is flat out impossible. And so when we ask you for this estimated cost, we just want you to sanity check it. We want you to identify these potential funding sources, whether it be a grant program or a local budget or a private-public partnership. We want you to identify the proposed completion timeframe. All things being equal, how fast would you like to get this done? And then that status. Now, we don't only do that for Siskiyou County, but we do that for all of you. So here is Doris as an example. These are the actions that Doris identified last time. These are the hazards that they address, and we've left the status blank because we don't know what happened to them. So you are all individually as jurisdictions going to get tables like this. And what we want you to do is we want you to fill out this status column. So just tell us, and again, we'll send you the answers. Is it carried over because we didn't have the money? Do we want to delete this because it's impractical or not politically possible? Do we want to carry this over and, or is it ongoing? For example, let's see, vegetation management programs, they could be ongoing. Now, what I also want you to notice here is that despite these being all hazards, we don't really have action items, individual action items for all of our identified hazards. We don't have an action item here for volcano. And I'm fairly certain that if a volcano erupts anywhere in Siskiyou County, Doris is going to be impacted by it. And so the Federal Emergency Management Agency and Cal OES would look at this and say, great, why don't you have an action item for volcano? And they'll say, we need to generate one. Now, we're going to help shepherd you through that process as we work forward with this. I also want you to notice that under this, I highlighted some. D6 right here says continue to participate not only in general mutual aid agreements, but also in agreements with adjoining jurisdictions for cooperative response to all hazards and disaster. FEMA will look at that action and say, how does that action mitigate hazards? How does that, in the long term, reduce or eliminate risk to identified hazards? Same thing goes for the fire department will conduct a mass care and shelter drill. Again, the idea is how in the long term does that eliminate or reduce risk to identified hazards? And so as you're reviewing these hazards, I'm going to highlight ones like this. I'll bold them in there or highlight them so that you can look at those with a little bit more of a jaundiced eye and say, is that really a mitigation action item? If it's not, we can delete it and we can replace it with something that is more relevant. Now, the other thing that I want you to look at here is, oops, sorry, this word right here, consider. Consider doesn't do you any good at all. FEMA and Cal OES will tell you, you can consider these actions as long as you want to. Consider away. What they want and what I want you to do is I want you to put action words in there. Don't put consider participate, put participate in the CRS, participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, especially if you are asking for money to do something. If you are saying, we've identified that doing this is going to cost $3,000, we would like to apply for a grant to do this, FEMA and Cal OES would look at that and say, why do you need $3,000 to consider something? That should cost nothing. Now, if you said you want to participate in it, then yes, we could see that that would require money and effort. And yes, we can think about giving you money for that. So again, as we're reviewing these, I'm going to highlight some things that I want you to think about and think maybe we could write this in a better way. Those are our hazard mitigation action items. And what we do at the very end of the process is this. We create a mitigation action cross-check table. Because one of the things that we want to show is we've considered all of our hazards, and here are the actions that mitigate those hazards. And we'll fill that out for all of our participating jurisdictions. We'll go through and make sure that we've got this cross-check matching to these hazards. Now, you can say there's nothing in the rule book that says, hey, you know what? We are not worried about landslide. And if you do that, we put a little justification in here. You'll say, based on community discussion, landslide is not a hazard that we are concerned about and would mitigate. It's okay to do that. We just have to identify that. So we are going to get these to you. We are going to get these old mitigation action items to you. And we are going to ask you to fill out this status column, and we are going to ask you to consider things that are bolded to say, does this work? Okay. Let's talk about our data requests. Now, this is another thing that I'm going to send you, but I want to talk about it in this meeting. What we are doing right now, as you can see, is we are generating your hazards, and we are generating data concerning your hazards, and we are generating information concerning your vulnerability to those hazards. And we have pretty darn good access to state GIS infrastructure and county GIS infrastructure. So we can generate some pretty good data based on that. But what we don't have great access to is local, if it exists, GIS infrastructure. And so one of the things we're going to do, and you guys don't have to worry about this because I'm going to summarize all this in a series of emails that we'll be sending out over the next couple of weeks to ask for this data, but this is just sort of, priming the pump. One of the things we're going to ask you for on a jurisdictional basis is, do you have any of this data? Do you have maps with a floodplain analysis and valuations and populations in those identified floodplains? Do you have unreinforced masonry buildings, a big concern in earthquakes? Do you have those mapped? Do you have an idea of their valuation? Do you have landslide maps with properties and valuations? Do you have subsidence maps showing areas of your jurisdiction that are subsiding and those subsidence rates? And do you have properties and valuations matched with that? That's the kind of information that we are going to ask you for to augment a local understanding of those hazard vulnerabilities and impacts. We're going to ask you for property valuations within your city limits. We have an entire idea of valuations for all of the county, but we don't have a really good idea of the valuations within each one of our city limits. We don't have an idea of your insurance valuations for any of your critical facilities: fire, police, government, hospital, water, wastewater. We're hoping that maybe your jurisdiction has that, so we can start putting a valuation to at-risk critical facilities. Communications are another big one. There's no real mapping on either the state level and not so much, maybe more on the county level, of your communications infrastructure, your communications towers, your repeater stations, things like that. Do you have that? Your repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss structures. Those are structures that flood repeatedly and are damaged by flood repeatedly. Your insurance services office fire suppression rating, your ISO rating. Those are the things, those are the data specific things that we're going to start asking you for. And that's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks as we start really fleshing out our hazards. We've fleshed them out on the higher county level. Now we want to dive down with the local level. And this is some of the data that we're going to start asking you for. Okay, so let's talk about our next steps. What are we going to do and how we're going to do it? Well, we're going to send you your capability assessment section. And we're going to say, take a look at this and make any changes that are relevant to you. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. We are going to send you your old mitigation action items and say, tell us the status of this, and if you need to, reword any of these. Once we've got those in and we start developing our matrix, if you remember our cross check that says, do we have actions for each of these hazards? We're going to come back to you and say, you don't have an action for this particular hazard. Let's add one in, and we'll work with you for actions that we think are relevant to your particular jurisdiction. We are then going to start asking you for that provision of local data to illustrate local vulnerability. We're going to say, hey, tell us about you. Tell us what you got about flooding and what concerns you've got about flooding. Tell us what concerns you've got about subsidence. I had a great discussion with Tule Lake the other day about subsidence and how badly they were being impacted by it. That's the kind of data that we want to bring to the fore, and that's the kind of data we want to highlight in the plan. So that's what's going to be coming at you in the next couple of weeks. Now, again, we'll be sending emails with explanations on all this. We'll be giving you all the data that you need, or all the information that you need to provide us with the data. All we're asking is that when we send it to you, you send it back so that we can put your local jurisdictional information in the plan. It should be a heck of a lot easier than actually writing an annex for your jurisdiction yourself. Now, I want to show you what the plan looks like a little bit, because I think it'll be illustrative of what we're driving at. I'm going to go to a single page here, so that hopefully is much, much bigger. But I want to show you what we're driving at so you can take a look at this. So this is section 1, and every annex had something like this in it. It's our introduction, assurances, incorporation, and adoption. It says, hey, this is what mitigation planning is. And it says, these are the assurances. These are the guidelines and sandbox that we're following in. These are the authorities that allow us to do this. This is how we're going to mitigate. This is how we're going to incorporate and integrate this plan into other plans. These are our adopting jurisdictions and the requirements for them. And this is how we're going to adopt the plan. Section 2 here documents the planning process. And again, in the planning process, this is something that should have been common in all of our annexes, how you did it. Rather than writing it over and over again, we're writing it once here. So we're saying, here's the steps we took. Here's our planning project stages. Here's how the plan is organized. Here is a discussion on hazard mitigation planning equity and our equity partners. Here's our hazard mitigation planning committee and the members and the representatives of each one of these jurisdictions, along with, are they an adopting jurisdiction? Participating stakeholders, coordinating stakeholders, and the difference between the two. Community outreach, how we did outreach, what tools we used, our hazard surveys, our planning meetings, our document resources. So what tools and documents we use to actually create this plan. Again, all commonalities amongst all of us. And then we move to our regional profile and development trends. Again, this is the population data we showed you with all of the graphs. This is our equity priority community partners information and all of this related to our participating jurisdictions, along with mapping concerning that. Here's our social vulnerability indexes, again, broken down based on different jurisdictions. Population migration, housing data, again, all broken down by participating jurisdictions. Mobile home data, because we recognize that those are particularly vulnerable. We talk about our homeless population, unsheltered versus sheltered, and trends in those homeless populations. We talk about our valuation data. We talk about our school district data, what's trends going on with that, and our school district boundaries. We talk about our community lifelines. We talk about our economic conditions overall in the county. And then we break maps down here that show job distribution. We talk about physical land cover. We talk about, you get the idea with this, right? Again, I just want to show you what it looks like. These are big projects that are going on in the county. So what kind of projects are going on? Because again, new projects tend to mitigate hazards because they have to be built to new building codes. We talk about the agricultural community and what's happening there. Now that is something that we are unable to break down on the jurisdictional level because the USDA does not report on that level, but we can show what is happening on our county level. When we go down to our capability assessment here, again, we talk about tables, departments supporting mitigation planning. So do you have a building department? And if they do, here's what their hazard mitigation roles are. Here's what fire departments do and GIS departments do. We talk about whether your jurisdiction has got any of these departments. We talk about the regulation of development, et cetera, zoning, zoning ordinances, wildfire ordinances, floodplain ordinances, all of those kind of good things. And again, whether you've got those ordinances, plans, we showed you that. We talk about your financial capabilities. We talk about your community-based classifications. Here's your ISO rating. Remember, that was one of the things of data that I was going to ask you for. We talk about Firewise USA program. As far as we can tell, the city of Dunsmuir is the only one that participates in the Firewise program. We talk about storm-ready communities, and Siskiyou County is a storm-ready community. We talk about your special district mitigation capabilities, and we break that down by type. So a community service district can generally do these things. A fire protection district can usually do these things. And then we identify what are our special districts in the county. We talk about how you comply with the NFIP. That is a plan requirement. And then we talk about how we can improve, what kind of improvement things we can do. We then drop down to your hazards. And again, you saw a lot about our hazards there. We talk about all that kind of good stuff. And I'm going to drop down and we talk about our mitigation action items. So here's all our mitigation action items, and you'll see here the tables. So here's Siskiyou County's old mitigation action items. Here's Doris's. Here's Etna. Here is Mount Shasta. Here is Weed and Tule Lake and Tule Lake and Wairika. I will say that Dunsmuir, I think Steven, you're on the line. When we looked at volume 2 of the annexes, we didn't find an annex for you. So we're going to have to find that and get it because we couldn't pull your actions forward. And the same thing went for Montague. There's no, in the copy we have, there's no jurisdictional annex for Montague as well. So those are ones that we're going to want to find, and we'll reach out to you to talk to you about getting those annexes. So, and then finally, section 7, again, just so you can see what we've got, because I promised you we'd show you where we were. Section 7 is plan maintenance. How do we keep this plan moving forward and maintained in the future? So this is what our plan looks like at this juncture. You can see that we've got pretty big chunks of it completed here. The one big thing that we're working on now, the big things that we're working on now is your hazard analysis and your mitigation strategy. And quite truthfully, most of your mitigation strategy is done. What we want to do is work with you to identify and improve those mitigation action items. Okay, back to my PowerPoint here. So that's what I've got for you. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff coming out in the next couple of weeks to get data from you. Our goal is to get this plan completed as soon as possible so we can ship this off to Cal OES and so we can ship this off to FEMA because we've lapsed in coverage. The plan expired in August and we're doing everything we can to get it done as quickly as we can so we can re-engage with that coverage. In that vein, one of the things that we've worked with Cal OES to do is we are going to send them at the end of this week what we've got done with the plan now so that they can pre-review it and not approve it, but they can say, yeah, this is exactly what we're looking for. Once they've done that and we're 100% we're on the right track, we will finish the plan and formally submit it to them. Their review process at that point will take a much shorter time and they can pass it on to FEMA in a much quicker time frame as well. Okay. That's where we are. That's where we are. That's what we're going to ask you to do. Hopefully, you guys have some questions that I can answer.
Hey, I would like to see extreme heat added as one of the hazards.
Okay. And the rationale behind that. So let me show you. I can show you absolutely. We can talk about extreme heat. So I want to show you the data that we kind of look at. And funnily enough, here I am at the NRI. And when we look at the NRI, the National Risk Index, if we go to our county view here, so you'll see here's Siskiyou County, and this happens to be drought. But we can switch this over to what we call
You're not sharing your screen right now.
Oh, gosh, yeah, that would help if I did that, wouldn't it? I apologize. Let's see if I can figure out where the heck I am. And we share my screen again. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can see this now. So as we look at a heat wave risk here, we see that it is a relatively low risk for the county. And if we switch to the census tract view, we see that for all of our census tracts, with the exception of this right here, which incorporates Montague, Montague is relatively moderate. Everybody else is what FEMA considers to be a relatively low risk. Now, that's not saying that this is the end-all be-all, but that was sort of the basis of our analysis. And what we can also do on the census tract level is we can go over here and we can pick a particular jurisdiction. So we can take a look at, this is drought again, so we'll go to heat wave. And we can go to the heat wave here and we can click on this census tract right here and you'll see the data comes up. And if we look at the data for the expected annual loss for these hazards, here's cold wave, here's drought, here's earthquake, here's heat wave. The expected annual loss for this census tract, which includes Etna, is $6,400 a year. Now, again, we're not saying that we don't want to include it, but that was our rationale for not including it. However, what we do say in the plan is this. We recognize with climate change that extreme heat events may increase in the future. And if that's the case, that is a hazard that we will want to address in the future. Now, we don't always rely just on this FEMA NRI. We also take a look at all sorts of other mapping. Let's see if I can bring it up here and share it. So, nope. Let's see if it's under. I think I minimized it. We take a look at the California State Climate Summary. So we take a look at the climate summary. So this is done by the NCEI, and this takes a look at the climate summary, and we look at things like the number of observed very warm nights. And you'll see here that we've got an average right here, and we look at the trends in this. Now, this does tend to be increasing a little bit. So it says, yes, the temperature is increasing, but again, is it increasing enough to warrant it as a hazard of concern in this?
So,
Not saying.
So in Dunsmuir, it's become an increasingly large hazard of concern. We just wrote a grant to do to add cooling to our community center, so we can open that as a community center. And or as a cooling center, and we are having conversations with the Siskiyou Resource Collaborative to begin operating cooling centers during extreme heat days, just because we're having more and more each year.
Okay.
The weather station in Dunsmuir, the data goes back to 1968. And if you look at that data, the number of 100-degree days is increasing pretty quickly. And just this year, we had our most 100-degree days in a row on record, which was 9. So it's something that we are increasingly concerned about, and we are going to want to go after additional grant funding to have facilities. So it's something that we would like to see in the plan, because we will have projects specifically for extreme heat to add to the plan.
Sure, we can absolutely add that in there. That's an easy fix. One of the things that we do is when we write the plan itself, again, just to give you guys the full visibility on this, and for those of you who get vertigo, look away because I'm zipping up here. When we actually write the plan, and when we don't include a hazard, here we go, we're getting close. These are inundation maps that we put in there. So these are all your, just because we landed on that, these are your inundation maps for your dam failure analysis. But when we don't include a hazard in there, one of the things that we do is we make sure that we write a justification as to why it's not in there. And so here's extreme temperatures as to why it's not in there. Now, we listen to you. And if you guys feel that that's a hazard in there, we axe this out. We add it in as a hazard. It's no drama whatsoever. But what we will want is we will want specific local information as to how this is impacting you and what your vulnerabilities are to extreme heat. Again, should be no problem at all. Okay, other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Sarah, I saw that you raised your hand. I'm sorry. I don't know what optimize means. Stop sharing. I saw that you raised your hand. What do you got?
No worries. I would agree with Stephen on that one with the extreme heat. As we've kind of talked with our community members, and they've kind of identified that as one. And looking in the chat, we'd be fine with it being listed under the umbrella of severe weather. But kind of branching off of that, what is the plan for public input, as each of our communities kind of have unique needs and unique vulnerabilities. So I was just curious what the plan is to discuss with community residents.
Yeah. So again, the idea is that all of these meetings that we run are open public meetings. So any member of the public can attend, and we hope they do, but we don't get a lot of turnout in the middle. But one of the next steps that we're going to do is once we get the plan sort of shaped out and ready, we're going to release it for full public review. And with that, we will release another online form, another online document where they can give their feedback on that. Because what we found almost universally is when we run public meetings, the attendance is just not great. And so what we'll do is we will write the plan, because we don't want to give them anything open-ended. We don't want to give sort of an open-ended discussion on this. What we want to do is we want to give sort of a boxed-in discussion. And so once we get the plan set out, we'll put a draft out there for public review and comment, along with a online survey that says, tell us what you think. And in order to identify that and slice and dice it to community specific concerns, the first question is, where do you live? And then based on that, we can then slice and dice the data saying, hey, you know what? We've identified that Wairika, the community concerns there are a little bit different than the community concerns in Weed or in Mount Shasta. And so that allows us to sort of start showing those community differentials. However, Sarah, we're open for any other ideas that you guys may have. Again, we're happy to facilitate that.
I think another question I might have is regarding the adoption process and the County Board of Supervisors. We just want to ensure that each community, each jurisdiction is going to have tailored mitigation strategies, and we just want to ensure that our mitigation strategies are considered, and they are very unique to each community, as we're kind of doing our own research and learning what projects are in place and what we need going forward, just so that we can ensure funding and ensure that we fill our gaps or identify our weaknesses.
Yeah, Sarah, that's a great point. So what we do is, and again, that's the collaboration with you guys that says, tell us what your specific vulnerabilities are, right? Do you have anything specific? For example, Wairika has got Greenhorn Dam right there. You are specifically vulnerable to a dam failure event. Now, everything that I see says that it's not going to be a catastrophic event. Like if Box Canyon Dam fails, that's an extremely high hazard dam. Greenhorn Dam is a high hazard dam, which indicates a lower potential loss of life. Certainly not zero, but different. And so we capture those vulnerabilities. We try to capture those vulnerabilities in the plan. And again, I don't think I'm sharing my screen here, but if I share again, let's share this. And I go to our, I don't want to show you my email. You guys don't want to see all my junk email. But if I go to our plan here and we talk specifically about that example on dam hazard, there's Box Canyon Dam with their inundation area specific to that. And that tends to be Dunsmuir that is in the sort of crosshairs of that, versus Greenhorn Dam, which is right here. And that shows this is the inundation area for Wairika. And then we show the specific inundation map for Wairika right here. So this is Greenhorn Dam breach analysis map. We do it for Shasta River as well. And fortunately, most of our jurisdictions, if not all of our jurisdictions, are out of identified inundation area for that. Same thing with the Shelley Dam. Shelley Dam is an interesting one. It tends to be kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it doesn't seem that big, but boy, the breach analysis on that shows that it does and hits a lot of areas. I digress with that, and I apologize. But then when we talk about the potential impacts, we do this. We talk about population impacts. So here it says, here's what will happen. We think loss of life, long-term displacement, economic consequences, et cetera, et cetera. But then we come down here and we drop a table in here and we say, hey, look, if we have a dam failure, this is our estimated population that's going to be impacted based on we use the inundation maps, we use the Census Bureau data, and we use a GIS analysis to say we estimate that around, and this will be refined, 6,500 people in Wairika are going to be impacted if Greenhorn Dam goes kerflooey. We talk about the potential impact analysis on that. So what we say is, look, on a per capita basis, on a daily basis on this, each individual, if they lose electric services, they're estimated to lose $199 a day, right? That's the impact. We take a look again with that as, again, our potentially impacted buildings. And again, we're generating this data right now. That's some of the things that we're having trouble with, is identifying an accurate figure here. That's some of the stuff that why we're asking you if you have an analysis of that, so we can understand what the buildings are. And then we go down here again and we say, hey, look, here's Greenhorn Dam. Greenhorn Dam happens to be the only one that had governmental facilities in an identified inundation area. And here's what those facilities are. And here's transportation and infrastructure, again, for each one of these dams. So this tends to be very jurisdictional specific. We talk about the costs here. Now, again, this is not jurisdictional specific because it's very, very hard to do on that level. But if we look at a nationwide average using Federal Highway Administration and Departments of Transportation data, I'll tell you that on average, resurfacing, repaving a local road is between $20,000 to $100,000 a mile. If I look at an interstate, that's $250,000 to $1 million. If I look at the cost of redoing a bridge, a small local bridge, is generally repairing it is generally $150 to $400 per square foot. And constructing, I'm sorry, this is constructing it, this is repairing it. And so again, we put those costs in there to give you an idea of if you have bridge damage, what it's going to cost. Now, it's far outside of our analysis scope to say, hey, the bridge is going to be wiped out or you're going to have some roadway damage or whatever it is. But using these figures, you can look and say, we could be on the hook for a lot of money if Greenhorn Dam fails and we have to repair all the roads. Again, we look at things like our transmission, high capacity transmission capabilities and generation stance for each one of the dams. We give you a chart that says, here's the cost of constructing a generating plant. The only generating plant in the county is on Box Canyon Dam. And we say, hey, look, on Box Canyon Dam, we estimate that reconstruction cost of that is about $60 million. That's what it is. And so again, here's costs for overhead utility lines, underground lines, repair costs, reconstruction costs. Here's costs for high capacity lines. So all of this is in there. Now, again, that data isn't specific to jurisdiction. I can't say, Wairika, if you repair Main Street and you've got a dam failure analysis, it's going to cost you this much money. But using these figures, you can get an idea of what it's going to cost. And so again, that's the kind of analysis we do to make sure that you understand what your vulnerability is. If you take the liberty of going back and looking at your old annexes, a lot of that's not in there. What we found is there's some of it's in there, but not a lot as to what understanding and comprehending what your potential vulnerabilities are. And then based on that, Sarah, when we go to and look away if you get vertigo, because I'm going to zip through here again. When we go to our mitigation strategies here, we talk about the mitigation strategy. So we do an introduction and, here's what it is. Here's our goals and objectives for our mitigation strategy. Here's how we reviewed them. Here's how we prioritize them. We use the Stapley criteria here, and then we give it a high priority. This is the same for everybody. We talk about the funding sources. So we identify all the potential funding sources that you can get funding for mitigation projects through. So they go from not only to the federal level, but down to the state of California level as well. We talk about small and impoverished communities and what that ranking does for you. If you're considered a small and impoverished community, you can get up to 90% of the total cost share. And we show our small and impoverished communities here. And then this is where, Sarah, I think you're intimating, you want those actions that are specific to you, right? You want the Wairika actions. So if I scroll down right here, here are all the old Wairika actions in here. Now we will pull those forward and make them current with the help of you, and you can add any new actions you want to in here. That is specific to you. It says, we've looked at what can impact Wairika. If someone handed us a bag of money, this is what we would spend it on. That is that specific section to you and to Wairika and to Weed and to Dunsmuir. That's what we're doing for you. Sarah, was that too much information? Did that cover too much, or did that help answer your question, I hope?
A little bit. It did help in part. I have a lot of concerns on the adoption process as far as the Board of Supervisors and just making sure that they don't overlook any jurisdictions tailored mitigation.
Yeah, so again, you can highlight that in there. I mean, again, the idea in order to write, you guys saw it last time, and it was a hodgepodge last time, if I'm being honest. But if you look at those annexes last time, I'm not sure how it passed. I'm not sure how it passed because I'm not sure how it was adopted because there were a lot of blanks in there.
100% agree on that. Yeah.
I'm not sure how it was adopted. So what we're asking here is that you're adopting, whether it be your town council or whatever it may be, they look at the totality of the plan, but you can highlight everywhere that Wairika is referenced in the plan. Here's the population for Wairika. Here's the housing for Dunsmuir. Here's the vulnerable populations for Weed. Here is the mobile home numbers for Etna. Here is the the dam inundation map for Wairika. Here is the NRI rating for on and on and on and on. It is very specific to you. That data is in there. It's just not in its own jurisdictional annex because in order to write an annex effectively, at least in my opinion, I have to rewrite the whole main plan in that annex to explain everything. Because if your jurisdiction, if your adopting jurisdiction is passing it, they really need to understand what it means. And I can't just say, here are your mitigation action items without explaining what your goals are, how you derive those mitigation action items. I can't do it without explaining what a Stapley analysis is. I can't go, I can't not put all that stuff in there in good faith and expect your jurisdiction to adopt it.
I do want to just get back to I know we're over time, but I do want to just get back to the public outreach real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware that this was also like a public meeting. And I know the first one was also. I don't think it's really good to lump them together because these are the meetings where you're coming to all the jurisdictions to talk to us. And then if you're doing that at the same time when you're talking to the citizens and we're not on the same page, that's really not good.
Right.
And then also these aren't being advertised as public meetings really. So, if we're going to have these as public meetings, they need to be scheduled, in the evening when most people are off work. We need to know more than a week in advance so we can start, posting about it so that people actually go to these. So I do, if we are going to have these as virtual public meetings, one, I think there needs to be a pre-meeting with all the partners, like we're having right now. But two, there needs to be we need to advertise it as such and put it at a time when people can actually attend. And I just don't think that there's been great communication with the jurisdictions about what's happening. It's more of been like we're being told what's happening without the chance to do adequate input up to this point. And I hear that you are going to be sending stuff out to us to give input, but I don't think that these meetings should be public because obviously I have some dissatisfaction right now that I'm voicing, and that's going to look really bad if I have to do that in a public meeting because that's the only time we're being offered the opportunity to speak.
Right. So, Stephen, your point is well taken, absolutely, and I apologize if you feel that you haven't been involved with the process. What we've been trying to do is we've been trying to shape out your plan to give you something to look at, to give you an idea of what it looks like. And there's a lot of data that we've been trying to compress and synthesize and do all that kind of stuff. We are, at this juncture, 2 months out from our first meeting. And I will tell you that normally a plan like this takes months and months and months. We can because we recognize that you guys have expired. And so that has been a lot of us putting our head down and doing this. And the idea is we want to give you something to look at that you can say, yeah, I like this. And you and I know in particular have had a discussion about the annexes themselves, about the utility of the annexes and the need for the annexes and why we don't feel they need to be in the plan. Because again, if you look at the old plan and the annexes, if I give everybody license to write their own annexes, it's uneven. It doesn't have the data that it needs in there. And quite truthfully, that plan last time would not pass FEMA this time in no way, shape, or form. And quite truthfully, my knee-jerk reaction is those annexes this time would not pass or would not be adopted by participating jurisdictions either. That's just my opinion. I don't know your town councils enough to say, yeah, they'd adopt it. And so what we've done and what we've tried to do is write a plan so that you can look at it and we can provide you and you can QC a document rather than nothing, than vaporware. Now to the public meetings.
That's great to hear. And see, that's like the kind of thing we need to hear, because I think that's the kind of thing that we're just not hearing.
Sure.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Matt, this is Brian Shinoni. I just want to chime in real quick while we're on
Sure,
that
Brian.
subject. Just kind of for the group, if we look at the group, we have 6 people in this meeting, which is right. We're inviting what, 50? The first invite was 500. I can't even get jurisdictions to show up to these.
Well,
meetings.
we were invited on Monday, so, or Friday,
Okay.
one of the days.
You've
So that's
been-
not
you've been at all
much
of them, Steve.
notice.
You've been at all of them, and I appreciate that. But my other jurisdictions, Montague didn't even adopt the last plan. So our problem is the communication. Our weed keeps getting bounced back. We've pushed the weed multiple times. Turnover is crazy here. We understand that. Also, we're on that deadline, like you said, and we want to get this done. We want to get it pushed. Then we can get it pushed to the public, which we appreciate that side of it. I appreciate the hard work on that. I appreciate all the folks online. And I think looking at this as a whole, like we want to get this move past the finish line based off of our conversations with the state and FEMA. We're moving ahead quickly compared to what we could have been moving. This could have been an expiration of 8 months. We could have been sitting on this thing, and we appreciate the hard work and everyone showing up and expressing concerns. But also for you as the planners, this is a great opportunity to start getting your local city, not even community members, like responsible agents that need to be involved in this. This is the time to do that. And we'll be better at pushing that. But at the same time, we have a whole county to look at as well. So we'll push that. I just wanted to say that. I just want to say thank you to Matt on that. And I do appreciate the hard work on that. And I do appreciate everyone showing up. Thanks.
Yeah, and we so Seven, to your point, to everybody's point, to those points, we're moving into now the more collaboration section of it. We spent 2 months writing the plan, and you can see that we consider sections 1, 2, 3, 4 that is to be substantially done and ready for review. Right at that point, we're going to turn it over to you and say, okay, give us what you got, right? Take a look at this so you've got something to jump off on and put your local flavor. We consider section 7 to be substantially complete at this point. That is the planning, the future planning effort on that. We've got section 5 and 6 that we're generating now. Section 6 is your mitigation action items. That is 75% complete with the framing of it. Now we're going to give it over to you to say, tell us what you would do with the money if someone gave it to you, right? That's going to be complete. And then the mitigation section, we're completing that now, and we're working on getting the county level completed. And then we're going to turn it over and say, let's add the local flavor in there. But again, I think when I hand it to you, you're going to be like, there's already a lot of local flavor in here. There's already a lot of what we need in here, but we can augment it in this way. That was the goal from the get-go. And I apologize if I didn't articulate that well at the beginning, but that was the goal, is to, I want to take as much onus off of you and put it on me to give you a product, then you can QC and say, yeah, we'd like to change this. We'd like to add this. This will make this more effective. That was the goal. And that's, I think, where we're getting very close to right now. Now, with the public meetings themselves, we always advertise that, we don't necessarily advertise them to everybody, but with the meetings themselves, they're always open to the public, because as far as I'm concerned, in this process, we have nothing to hide, even if it's disagreements, because the disagreements show that we are working to make a stronger and more robust plan for everybody. And those don't embarrass me or concern me at all. Seven, if you said, hey, I think you're doing a crap job, Matt, I would say, I appreciate your input. How can we be better for you? What can we do to work better as a team?
I'm pretty direct. So this is me restraining myself right now. So I just don't want to have to embarrass anybody in a future meeting. I expect accountability, and so I would suggest having a separate public meeting, but we can continue to do it this way. I just hope that we advertise this ahead of time next time.
We will, to your point, we will have open public meetings like the first public meeting. The first one was open, advertised well in advance, and I don't think we got any members of the public. I don't think anybody attended.
Well, none of the jurisdictions knew that it was a public meeting going into it. So we were unaware. So we did not advertise it through our channels.
We will make sure that we rectify that and make sure that it is a wide open public meeting and give plenty of notice so that anybody who wants to attend can attend. 100%, and your point is well taken on that. Okay. Other thoughts, comments, concerns? I know we've gone over the time, and I do apologize about that. Anything else that we want to discuss? Anything else that we want to hear about? Now, please also keep in mind that any of you, and Stephen and I have been doing this for a while, or have done this a bunch of times, you can always contact me directly, right? You can always call me and say, hey, Matt, what's happening with this? What's going on with this? We want to change this. We want to do this, whatever it may be. I'm always open to that, you know, so again, you can always contact me directly and we can talk about things. But before I kick you out of here, any other comments, concerns, anything you're worried about? I've got a note here that we want to absolutely add extreme heat as a potential hazard for the jurisdictions. Any other thoughts, comments, concerns?
Matt, this is Brian Schroeder. No, I don't think so. I appreciate everything. Appreciate taking that consideration for the extreme heat, and then we'll reach out as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. One more request, Stephen, if you've got your annex from the last time, if you could send me a copy of that, because in volume 2 of the copy I have, it's not in there. And the same thing goes, Owen and Brian, for Montague. I know they didn't adopt last time, but I do not have a copy of their annex either.
I'll work that. No problem.
Okay.
We'll get that taken care of. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. And that will allow me to generate those actions, pull them forward, and then we can send those off to you guys and you can start reviewing them.
Sounds good. We appreciate you.
All right, you guys have a great day. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you.